Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar, Not Letting the Chips Fall, India's $10 billion incentive policy for semiconductors. My name is Rohini Sanyal. I'm the research economist for India at the ISI Emerging Markets Group. I would like to thank everyone for joining today, and I'm happy to see all attendees from so many different countries. Um, with that, a quick apology for starting a little late. We were facing some technical issues, but hope that our content and what we are about to present today will make up for a little bit of the lost time. Um, with that, I'll just start with a bit of context about our webinar today. As you may all know, that the global demand for semiconductors is expected to accelerate in the near future, and it's going to be driven by the normalizing economic activity as well as the demand for electronic items. Due to the greater digital transformation that the world is seeing, many of which in terms of the electronic items, many of this form components for larger products such as vehicles. But the incidence of COVID-19, coupled with the geopolitical tension between the US and China, has led to a shortage of semiconductors across the world, which in turn has revealed the scope for semiconductor manufacturing. This is where India comes in. India's budget for the fiscal year 2023 has incorporated this with a $10 billion incentive policy that is aimed to strengthen manufacturing in India. Today's discussion, as the title suggests, will be centered around the future of semiconductor business in India and the incentives introduced by the government to catalyze the growth of this sector. I would now like to introduce our panelists for today. Raja Singh Khurana is the Senior Assistant Vice President at Invest India, which is a national investment promotion and facilitation agency of the Government of India. Raja has served across the value chain of investment, targeting the facilitation life cycle from driving strategy, targeting exercises for sensitizing the global investor community to promotion and facilitation of investments into India, especially in the manufacturing sector. Besides these, he has also worked towards effective policy advocacy with both central and state governments in enhancing the ease of doing business. More recently, he's leading the secretariat set up under the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade on investments and managing the project development cells, which have been set up across 29 economic ministries. Raja has a bachelor's degree in commerce from the University of Delhi, after which he earned a dual MBA in competitive intelligence and strategic management with a gold medal. Our other speaker for the day is Lakshya Sharma, who is a part of the ESDM team at Invest India, the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency. He has been instrumental in building the India investment pipeline, along with conceptualizing incentive policies and structural reforms for electronic sector and semiconductor sector. Lakshya has a background in chemical engineering, having completed his undergraduate degree from the BITS Pilani, and he has 2 years of experience at Invest India now. Welcome, both of you. Now, before we proceed, I'd like to mention a couple of points that will help us interact during this session. During today's webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. All attendees are on mute, so you can submit your questions in writing using the question panel on your right. We will answer as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end. We also have a handout section just above the question panel where we have uploaded our presentation and some other documents. You can download it for your reference. At the end of the webinar, we have a short survey to capture your feedback and expectations. So hope you'd fill that out. Now, to some of you who are not familiar with what we do at the ISI Emerging Markets Group, one second. We have been in the business of providing information on emerging markets over 25 years, and we have 2 brands, CIC Data and EMIS, that specialize in providing high quality emerging markets content. CIC Data provides macroeconomic data on more than 200 economies, while EMIS focuses on providing company, industry, and country research on emerging economies. Invest India is one of the most awarded investment promotion agency in the world. Invest India is an advisor, guide, and facilitator to every investor looking to make a home in India. It is the first point of contact for global companies whom they handhold from day they start exploring India as an investment destination, and at every step of the way throughout their journey in the world's most liberal investment destination. Their multifaceted activities include detailed India entry strategies and research, end-to-end handholding, and investment aftercare. They work with every major country around the world and across all Indian states. Their team is comprised of over 200 of the finest, most talented professionals handpicked from India's and indeed the world's best universities and companies as investors pro bono guide to help developing India's the best India strategy. Working with every department of the Government of India, their expertise in providing advice and assistance is consistently rated the best in the world. Most recently, Invest India was awarded the Investment Promotion Award 2020 by United Nations Conference on Trade and Development for good practices during the pandemic. Now, on our agenda for today, as you can see, just a quick brief about the manufacturing sector, and then Raja would be presenting a new India, or transforming India rather, recent initiative to drive investments, and then Lakshya would be speaking about the semiconductor manufacturing in India. So before I hand it over to Raja and Lakshya, I just want to take a few minutes to frame some broad pictures about the Indian economy and the manufacturing sector. Now, as you can see here, manufacturing as a share of GVA had been declining prior to the pandemic. And after the pandemic, we see a slight uptick in the share in manufacturing as a share of total GVA. And if I look at the components of manufacturing GVA, we can see that other manufactured products have actually, increased their share in total. So obviously, the manufacturing sector, is gearing up for a good sustainable growth. Coming to industrial production and manufacturing, the IPI for manufacturing, and you can see here that even with a dip in the pandemic, the pick up after the pandemic has been quite substantial, and this momentum is expected to continue for forward. Given there are no other downside risks. One of the biggest advantages that we have seen right now is India having a more of subdued consumption. So consumption recovery is a bit gradual given the uncertainty posed by the pandemic. And in that case, India's exports have started picking up. I call it the inadvertent push towards export. So as you can see, the exports are actually at a historic high. And even if I consider non-oil and non-gold exports, we can see the same sort of a trajectory. So clearly, the manufacturing sector has quite a bit of potential, and the with good exports, there is some true potential that this sector has, going forward. Now, coming to the overall Indian economy, obviously, because of the pandemic, we saw a big dip in the growth rate, and of course we've bounced right back, one owing to low base, and secondly due to a strong vaccination drive, steady resumption in economic activity, thanks to better management of each new wave. With actually the third wave, we saw the least disruption any wave has seen so far. So given this, it can be safe to assume that this recovery is slated to continue, and not just recovery, we will experience good growth in the foreseeable future. The government is emphasizing on long-term growth, as we saw in the budget for this year, and is now focusing on driving investments rather than just consumption to actually make that growth sustainable. And you can see here that private consumption has been a little bit more subdued, while the pickup in investment has been sharper that way. Obviously, this is because of low base, but I'll show a few more numbers here which can explain this better. So now what's happening is that investment, gross fixed capital as a share of the GDP has been sort of declining. As you can see here, it did a brief pickup in 2019, just before the pandemic hit, and then it, of course, crashed. Similarly, capacity utilization has also dropped substantially. Uh, this means that the companies are sort of not in this uncertain times would not really be looking to invest. Hence, the government has stepped in with a higher capital expenditure budget, trying to crowd in private investment so that we can move our gross investment rate upwards. The capacity utilization can increase. Um, so that's the main idea here, to grow via investments rather than have a consumption-led growth. And finally, we come to a bit of foreign investments, and what we see is that even though the growth has been sort of volatile, if I may call in some ways, but if I look at the actual levels of FDI to India, that has increased in 2020 with a very marginal fall in 2021. However, if I'm looking at the gross investment, in terms of FDI, that has actually had a substantial increase. So this bodes well for the Indian economy. Of course, there is so much more. The number of private investments project under implementation in the manufacturing sector, which the economic survey has captured, that has been rising over the years, and companies are also hitting record profits in the recent quarters. And mobilization of risk capital is bodes well for the acceleration in private investment. This is taken from the economic survey. A sturdy and cleaned up banking sector stands ready to support private investment adequately. So, we are seeing a lot of support towards growth, and especially via investments. I'm reiterating here. So with that said, let me hand it over to Raja, who will now talk about what kind of transformations are happening in India, and what is the path forward. So over to you, Raja.
Thank you, Rohini and CEIC team. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Raja Singh Khurana. I'm part of the Invest India team, which is the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency of the Government of India. And what I thought today is I'll just walk you through over the next 10 minutes on what's happening in the country when it comes to economic activity, and what are the initiatives which you will find of use if you are looking at setting up business in India. If you look at the Indian economy, we are right now at around $3 trillion, just knocking on the doors of becoming the fifth largest economy in the world. But the interesting fact about that $3 trillion number is that it took us 60 years to achieve and become a $1 trillion economy. And we added 2 more trillions to that number just in a span of 7 years. That is the level of transformation, the size, speed, and scale of transformation which is happening here. I thought we'll start with a small snapshot on a few markers which can give you an idea of what's happening within the economy. But most importantly, these markers are an outcome of a young, aspirational population where the average age is still under 30, and over 500 million under that age group, which exists in the country. One more interesting fact to pick up from here is that you will see that we are the second largest mobile manufacturer with the second largest internet users. But when it comes to data consumption, we are number one. And that also shows up in the fintech story, wherein relatively the fintech story is new in India, which started primarily after 2016. But within the span of last 6 years, we emerged to be the largest global fintech adopter in the world. What I also to do in the next slide is to give you a perspective on how we are going to grow in the next 25 years. Take a long-term view on that, and also further we'll draw on a short-term or a medium-term view for the next 3 years. If you look at the current size of the Indian middle class, we are under 400 million and 30% of the total population. But if you look at the projections and if you do a scenario planning, India will be the second largest economy in the world, with over $1.3 billion of middle class population out of the 1.8 billion population that is expected and projected to be in the next 25 years. That's a 2x growth when it comes to the middle class population. And the factor of growth remains the same when it comes to the urban population. In the Indian context, around 30% is currently urban, and it is expected to go over 60% in the next 25 years. We'll take a medium-term view in the next slide, where if you look at the year which is closing in a few weeks and the next 2 years, if you look at the Indian growth for this year and for the next year, we are expected to clock just about 9%, which is higher than the world average and continue to remain so, is going to continue to remain so for the next 2 years, even when you compare it with the major economies in the world. You can see the witness, or you can witness the resilience of the economy, wherein due to the pandemic in the first quarter of 21, wherein there was a dip of over 20% in the economy. Within 12 months, within 4 quarters, there was a bounce back. And again, coming back to the demographic dividend, this is possible due to a large young an aspirational consumer base, and the economy bounced back by clocking 20% quarter economic growth just within 4 quarters of pandemic hitting the growth rates. If you look at a few tax numbers, we have registered the highest ever tax collections in the last few quarters. This is despite the pandemic. Now, how is it possible? There are certain government initiatives and government reforms which I'm going to draw upon. But just before that, I want to take you to the next slide and talk about the export story. What's happening there? We are set to achieve the target which we have set out for ourselves a few months back of over $400 billion of merchandise exports. And what has happened in the Indian export history for the first time is that we have clocked more than $30 billion every month of merchandise exports for 11 straight months. And that has never happened in the history. And of course, if you look at the 3 years performance, there's a CAGR of over 11% when it comes to the exports. I will spend the next 5 minutes now on the initiatives which is propelling these growth from the business and economic point of view. If you go to the next slide, in an investor journey. Before that, I'll cover the startup part. There is one interesting thing which is happening in India, which on the startup front, we are creating one unicorn every day. Every 5 days, in the first 40 days of since the year started, and we are the third largest country when it comes to unicorns, and the total capital that these unicorns, 92 unicorns, is $800 billion. When it comes to the time taken to become a unicorn, the shortest that we have so far is a startup called Mensa, which clocked the unicorn level just in over 6 months. So just to give you a perspective on how, of course, the traditional and the conventional businesses are growing, but just alongside them, the new India is also thriving on the startup journey. Now, going to the initiatives part, which is fueling this growth across the business and economic vertical, is one, the FDI policy. India right now has the most open FDI policy in the world, where more than 90%, or in more than 90% of the area, there is 100% foreign investment allowed under automatic route, which essentially means that there is no approval required whatsoever if you're a foreign investor, but you just need to inform the government, but you don't have to take any approval. And that is possible in more than 90% of the business cases. We have recently opened up a few more sectors, including petroleum, natural gas, telecom, defense, and insurance. The FDI limits for these sectors have been revised, and they have been made more open for foreign investments. The second part on taxation is the corporate tax. In 2019, Rohini, if you can go back to the previous slide, in 2019, India took a historic decision to cut down the corporate tax rate for companies to 15%, which is one of the lowest in the world. And these are for new manufacturing entities. Further on the taxation front, we introduced a goods and service tax, which essentially put all the economic activities and products consumed in the country under 4 different slabs. Again, this is on the simplification of procedures and business side of it. Over 27,000 compliances have been simplified in the last 2 years. And just to make it easier for any company to come in and set up their shop in India, there is a national single window system which has been set up. The government is using technology at its optimum to ease up the journey of an investor. And we're going to talk about that in the next slides as well. But just to give you a perspective on national single window, you as an investor can log in to the system, to the national single window system, and from the click of the button, you are informed about the different approvals, NOCs, permissions which are required for you to set up your shop, basis a few primary questions that the system asks. And then from there, you can apply to more than 500 plus regulatory approvals and systems across the central government and also the state government. So this is one of its kind initiative to ease in the investor journey by use of technology. If we go to the next slide, how the government is using technology for easing the investor journey is on the industrial land bank side. So we understand that land is an important factor of production when it comes to manufacturing. So what we have done is we have digitized the entire industrial land bank database available within the country and put it out there for the investor. So this is GIS enabled, which essentially means that you sitting in your country, if you are looking at any industrial grade land in India, you can do so just at a click of few buttons, and you can also purchase it. And there are data metrics that are available on industrial parks, which covers the logistics, the raw material availability, and other parameters which a business has to consider before setting up a manufacturing unit in the country. In terms of institutionalizing the investment, targeting and facilitation, the government of India took a historic decision and have set up 29 different units in 29 ministries. And these are called project development cells, which are essentially to handhold investors like yourself and to ensure that their journey in India is as smooth as possible. So these 29 economic the project development cell and economic ministries are essentially tasked with hand-holding the investors so that the investor doesn't face any issue and to ease up their journey in India. One of the historic decisions which took was to spend over $30 billion in the next 5 years to launch a scheme which is called the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, wherein the key mechanism of incentivizing company is is going to be on the basis of the production that the company is or the investors are going to make in India. This scheme covers 14 sectors and bases the production levels of the company. The government the incentive to the company is within the tune of 4 to 6% of their sales. If you move to the next slide, the next incentives are on the labor side of it, which is again one of the important factors of production for any manufacturing unit. So what we're doing there is we're trying to ease in the labor laws because basis the experiences of the companies, we felt that there is a need to simplify it. Hence, we are merging all the major labor laws into 4 different codes, which provides the flexibility in hiring and retrenchment. And just to improve the domestic production and to safeguard the interest of domestic manufacturers, we have till now issued over 100 QCOs, which are the quality control orders, so that the domestic manufacturing capacity in the country is protected. And this is also to promote export and substitute imports. Also, there is a preference for preference to companies which are manufacturing domestically in the government tenders. So that is the public procurement market in India is estimated to be over $400 billion. So the idea here is that we procure the products and goods and services from companies which manufacture within India. If just to draw highlights on the recent announcements in budget, which we thought would be relevant for you, are listed in the next slide, which is essentially that we are looking to issue. Rohini, if you can go to the next slide, please. We are looking to auction the 5G spectrum this year, and drones have been identified as a major segment where the government has started focusing and started utilizing the capacity of drones in a lot of other activities, including agriculture, digitization of land records, and safety and security of the country, which will give boost to the drone ecosystem and the demand side of drone ecosystem. And also on the data centers side, the data center energy storage system have been included in the list of infrastructure, which essentially means that they are eligible for a lower a lower cost of financing from the banks. And finally, on the battery swapping, there is an interesting and exciting this is an interesting and exciting space where the government is now planning to introduce battery swapping policy in the EV space. So these are the few initiatives and reforms which I thought which I should walk you over. And of course, we as a central entity on investment promotion and facilitation remain at your service for any questions, queries, any hand-holding that you require to understand the Indian market and to set up your units in India. Thank you. Over to you, Rohini.
Thank you, Raja, for that excellent brief about what is happening in India right now. I think it was very interesting for me to learn as well. With that, let's go to our main highlight for today, which is the semiconductor industry. And with that, I will hand it over to Lakshya to take us through what's happening on that front.
Thanks, Rohini, and thanks to the CAIC team for organizing the webinar. Welcome again to all the attendees. So building on what Raja highlighted on the recent initiatives taken by the government of India to promote manufacturing in India, today I'll briefly talk about in next 10 minutes about the India's growth in the electronics manufacturing, the foundation for our Semicond India program. I'll get into detail in the of the different verticals of the Semicond India program. And since its launch in December 2021, where we are currently in the implementation stage of the policy. So to start with, just to highlight what Honorable Prime Minister of India recently highlighted in his address in the World Economic Forum, India has established itself as the global hub for electronics manufacturing. We are today much more integrated in the global supply chain, and we are a reliable partner to the global supply chain today. The kind of policies that have been conceived in the recent time, including the PLI schemes and the Semicon India program, has been built with a vision of 20 to 25 years. These policies have taken into account the long gestation period required to build an ecosystem in India, and hence the vision behind the Semicon India program. Next slide, please, Wayne. So just to again highlight what Raja said about the nature of the Indian economy, today we are a much more digital economy. The fundamental digital transformation of our economy has created a lot of market opportunities for electronics and semiconductors in India. Today we have about 1.2 billion smartphones, almost about 700 million smartphones, which will go to about 1.2 billion smartphones. Internet users in India will go to about 1 billion by 2025. At the same time, the recent policies on data centers, IoT devices has created a lot of demand for electronics and semiconductors in India. Next slide, please. So again, to start, to give a brief overview of our electronics manufacturing growth, since Make in India initiative in 2015, we have consistently grown in our electronics production from $29 billion to $76 billion. Today, we are a market of about $120 billion, and it will reach to the tune of $300 billion by financial year 25-26. The two key verticals for our electronics growth story has been mobile phones and IT hardware, both the market segments for which we have dedicated PLI schemes, where the production we aim to reach from $34 billion to $110 billion and $2 billion to $40 billion, the key foundation for our growth of our electronics manufacturing story. Next slide, please. To give a macro overview of the fiscal support provided by Government of India, comprehensive fiscal support provided by Government of India is to the tune of about $30 billion, which can broadly be split into three verticals. The $7 billion incentive, which was launched in 2020, which focuses on the mobile phones and IT hardware, the dedicated PLI schemes, and for the electronic component manufacturing in India. A SPEC scheme, which focuses on CAPEX subsidy for components and sub-assemblies, and an EMC scheme for creation of plug-and-play infrastructure for industry in India. The $10 billion Semicond India program, to which I'll come in greater details in my next slides. And additionally, $13 billion incentive has been provided to the allied sector, which includes likes of advanced chemistry cell, automobiles, telecom, solar PV modules, and white goods, broadly LEDs and ACs. So all in all, the incentives have been provided by Government of India to all the major electronics and electronics in India, which creates a large market for semiconductor in India. Next slide, please. To give the underlying current that has been defining our creation of the policy framework for the PLIs and Semicond India program has been the cascading incentive program, under which we have provided incentive to every part of the supply chain, including finished products, sub-assemblies, and components. So what essentially it translates to the industry is that the more the supply chain is localized in India, the more the incentive can be availed by the manufacturers. So just to give an example, for example, if a mobile phone is manufactured in India, then the PLI scheme can be availed as an incentive. Additionally, the camera modules and vibrator motors used in the mobile phone, there is an incentive policies to target those sub-assemblies, and a dedicated PLI for additional components like active, passives, and PCBs. So every part of the supply chain has been incentivized by Government of India. Besides this, there has been additional state incentives in form of CAPEX subsidies, power subsidies, land subsidies, and tax refunds. Next slide, please. Now, coming specifically to the semiconductor market in India, today we are a market of about $15 billion, which will reach to the tune of about $64 billion by 2025 and $110 billion by 2030, which would be about 10% of the entire global market. A substantial chunk of the global demand would come from India. And the key reasons why India will take a larger market share in the semiconductors has been the largely unpenetrated market for India for electronic devices. Additionally, the Indian EMS industry has been at a much more maturing stage with the PLI schemes, and there has been large demand for these semiconductor devices in India. Additionally, the emerging technologies like 5G, IoT, electric vehicles has increased semiconductor consumption in all electronics devices, as the semiconductor content in every device has increased during this period. As a country, we have a unique market mix in this, which we aim to target broadly mobile phones, IT hardware, and telecommunications, which would be the largest market segment that Government of India wants to cater through the Semicond India program. Additionally, the electric vehicles and automobiles will also play a key role in the Indian ecosystem. Next slide, please. Now, coming to the tailwinds that have been driving the semiconductor supply chain towards India, I'd like to highlight three broad points. First of all, with the recent pandemic, semiconductor chip shortages, and now the conflict in the Europe, there has been large demand for additional semiconductor capacity around the globe, there has been concerns regarding the concentration of the supply chain and the need to build resilience in the supply chain. Additionally, since it's a very specialized manufacturing sector, India, with its engineering talent, has pushed itself as a favorable destination for setting up a semiconductor fab. On all the major pointers to be considered for setting up a semiconductor fab, including government incentive, labor cost, access to talent, ease of doing business, security of IP assets, supporting infrastructure, and geopolitical consideration, India strongly pitches itself as a favorable preferred destination for semiconductor manufacturing. Next slide, please. Now, coming specifically to the $10 billion Semicon India program, it can broadly be divided into 4 verticals: the semiconductor and display fab scheme, where we have given incentive to the tune of 50% of the project cost; semiconductor OSAT and a dedicated scheme for OSAT and the compound semiconductors, under which we have given incentive to the tune of 30% of the capex; a dedicated scheme for fabless design startups and MSMEs; and a revamp of the semiconductor laboratory in Mohali, the strategic fab of India. I'll come in greater details for the 3 segments in my next slides. Next slide, please. So to start with the semiconductor fabs, we have identified the broadly three verticals under which we want to target the technologies, starting the advanced nodes starting from 65 nanometer between 45 nanometer to 65 nanometer. A 30% incentive to the tune of the project cost will be provided. For technology node size between 28 nanometer to 45 nanometer, incentive to the tune of 40% of the project cost will be provided. And for technologies of 28 nanometer or lower, the incentive would be to the tune of 50% of the project cost. We have a bare thresholds for which the kind of fabs we have imagined, that it has to be in 300 millimeter wafer size, and the installed capacity eventually with the ramp up should reach more than 40,000 wafer starts per month. We have closed the first round of applications under the scheme. We have received 3 applications, and we are in the process of evaluating the proposals. Next slide, please. And now, one of the key verticals of our Semicon India program has been semiconductor packaging, or broadly called as OSAT in the industry. Here, the incentive is provided to the tune of 30% of the capital expenditure. Here, the incentive is on the reimbursement basis, where we have targeted both the advanced technologies and advanced packaging and conventional packaging. The scheme is open for application, and it will remain open for application for 3 more years. We have received interest, and we are continuously facilitating investors in filing applications under the scheme. Next slide, please. Now, a dedicated scheme for the fabless startups and MSMEs is the design-linked incentive, under which the incentive has broadly been classified under 2 verticals, one on the product development and the deployment. For product development, we have given incentive to the tune of 50% of the eligible expenditure, including manpower cost. And once the product is developed and certain milestones has been achieved and the product is deployed in the market, there is a PLI scheme to the tune of 6 to 4% on the net sales for the products. Additionally, besides the financial support, there has been an infrastructure support provided under the scheme for the fabless startups and MSMEs, including national EDA credit, IP core repositories, prototyping, and post-silicon validation. The scheme is open for application. We aim to target almost about 100 startups under the scheme, and the scheme will remain open for application till 1st January 2025. Next slide, please. So besides the financial incentives, Government of India has also provided incentives in the form of plug and play infrastructure through electronics manufacturing clusters. Additionally, the fabs coming under the fab and facilities coming under the Semicon India program would be given trusted fab status, and there would be a demand aggregation support provided by Government of India with respect to the market access in India. Additionally, given the technology intensive nature of the industry, 2.5% of the scheme budget has been kept dedicatedly for R&D, skill development, and training. So broadly, the policy covers in its entirety for the development of the semiconductor ecosystem. Next slide, please. Now, one of the key verticals this time in our Semicon India program has been an institution, a dedicated institution called India Semiconductor Mission, which will be the implementing agency for the Semicon India program. It would be led by the industry expert and driven, will drive the India semiconductor strategy and engagement with the industry on a continued basis. So we have fair amount of realization that the industry requirements does involve a phased approach to building the ecosystem. To institutionalize that approach, the India Semiconductor Mission will drive India's semiconductor strategy in next 15 to 20 years. Next slide, please. Once the scheme is launched, we are in the implementation stage of the policies. We have started the location analysis, and like all major semiconductor countries like Taiwan, Malaysia, who have developed their mega fab complexes like Kulim Park or the Hsinchu Park in Taiwan, we have identified few locations to set up a mega fab complex in India, under which we will set up a fab and build an ecosystem around that fab in the country. Broadly speaking, the states have been we aim to target is in the southern states of Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Daman and Diu, and in the central India in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Odisha, and Telangana. So this is the preliminary evaluation done by the Invest India. We engage in the conversation with the industry, and based on the best financial merit and the business decision, the location of the fab and the facilities will be determined. Next slide, please. One of the key changes in the Semicon India program has been change in the policy implementation paradigm within the government. So today we are approaching the implementation in the form of a whole of government approach, under which there is an attempt to build a cooperative federalism model in the scheme implementation by bringing together both the central and the state governments, and ensuring that the trusted fabs and facilities receive the infrastructure and regulatory approvals and all the necessary project requirements like land, water, power at one go, so that we can speed up the implementation of the project and eventually increase in the industry's interest in the Semicon India program. Next slide, please. One of the key verticals for, as I said, that it's a technology intensive industry. So one of the key drivers for India as a semiconductor destination has been its engineering talent. We have more than 78 premier institutions in India, to the likes of IITs, IIITs, and NITs, providing continued sustained pipeline for the workforce to the industry. And as with the all global major semiconductor hubs around the globe, like the Taiwanese story was built on the ITRI. India has also built institutions for semiconductor research, which will promote collaborative innovation with the industry and development of the technologies to the likes of SCL, Sitar, GATEC, Sense facility in IISc, CMAT for the materials development, and SSPL for the other technologies. So eventually the technology would be developed in these research institutions in collaboration with the industry and can be ramped up in the manufacturing facilities approved under the Semicon India program. Beside this, Government of India has launched programs like INUP, Electronic Sector Skill Council, and SMDP program for development of manpower for the semiconductors. For the fabless startups, we have Government of India also provides support in terms of incubation support in the form of Safal, Makers Village, and Fab CI. Next slide, please. I just want to highlight on the vibrant fabless design ecosystem in India. There are more than 35 design companies in India, mostly located in Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune. There are about more than 2,000 Indian chips have been designed in India, and Indian account to the tune of more than about 20,000 engineers in the semiconductor industry. With the collaboration between industry and the academia, we have built a great heights in the semiconductor innovation through microprocessors like Shakti, Vega, and the startup ecosystem has been a key driver for the fabless design ecosystem in India. Next slide, please. And coming to the end of my presentations, Invest India has been working very closely with the EMC's electronics manufacturing clusters in India, and with providing plug and play infrastructure support to the upcoming facilities and fabs in India. Just to highlight few among them has been Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh, Mundra in Gujarat, Hyderabad in Telangana, and Mysore in Karnataka. There are about 120 electronics manufacturing clusters and common facilities centers in India, and Invest India has been providing support to the investors in accessing the clusters. Next slide, please. Just this is from my end, and just to reiterate what Raja said, that Invest India has been closely working with all the investors interested in setting up in the Semicond India program, and feel free to reach for any query, support, or one-on-one presentation on the Semicond India program. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lakshya. That was very, very enlightening. With that said, we will now go to our Q&A section. But before we start off, I will just remind everyone that you can submit your question using the question panel on your right. We already have a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So let me just bring one up for, I think this one is for Lakshya. How is this incentive going to help the SMEs and MSME enterprises which are into this business or are heavily dependent on the semiconductor chip?
Sure. So broadly speaking, the vision behind the Semicon India program has been to build a semiconductor ecosystem in India, which can cater to the semiconductor demand to India. First of all, the emergence of a semiconductor fab and OSAT facilities will create additional lines of supply for MSMEs and SMEs in India. Additionally, the design companies that have been will be approved under the design linked incentive companies will allow SMEs and MSMEs to have much more customized chip design in India.
Thank you. There's actually another question pertaining along the same line. So I think I should just ask this, that how is the $10 billion incentive going to help the small and medium scale enterprises in India who are in deep trouble with the present microchip crisis?
So as I said, the aim here is to create a trusted supply chain for semiconductors in India. The building of the manufacturing capacity in India will ensure that the reliance on the risky supply chains due to the concentration of the supply chain will be reduced. And so first of all, the resilience in the supply chain will ensure that MSMEs and startups have much more de-risk their supply chains. And additionally, the emergence of the ecosystem will allow much more self-reliance in the semiconductor chips.
Thank you, Lakshya. I also see a very interesting question which has come up is, and I think this is something that everyone would be interested in knowing, what are the skill sets or degrees that are required, to achieve this goal of supporting the semiconductor industry? So if you can shed some light on like how the youth can be helped, or how the business can benefit from the skills, and what kind of courses they would have to take.
Sure. So as I highlighted in my presentation, there have been dedicated schemes launched by Government of India for building skill pipeline for the semiconductor industry, including INUP, SMDP program, and Electronic Sector Skill Council. Broadly, we have divided the workforce in broad three categories, starting with the technician level skills to the graduate level skill, and then the postgraduate and PhD programs. We aim in the next 5 years, we aim to create 85,000 skilled workforce for the Semicon India program. And accordingly, the conversations have been conducted with the academia and the universities on what are the changes that can be made in the course curriculum to cater to the demands of the industry.
That sounds amazing. Lakshya, thank you for informing us about this. Another question that I see is the scope of chemical requirements for the semiconductor manufacturing in India. What do you have to say about that?
As I highlighted in my presentation, the idea is always has been to build a semiconductor fab complex in India, in which we will house all the major suppliers, including capital equipment suppliers, specialty gases and chemical suppliers. We have been working on that. So Indian chemical industry has been very strong in their manufacturing capabilities, and based on our conversations with them, they have been more than willing to provide the semiconductor grade raw materials required for the industry, even once the fabs have been approved by the government of India.
Thank you, Lakshya. Lakshya, we have some more coming in from the audience. So there's one which says, can you name a few companies which will benefit from this incentive scheme, from these incentive schemes for semiconductors? I'm not sure. Well, if you understand, please go ahead and answer.
So pretty much, as I said, that we have targeted the entire value chain of the semiconductor, starting from the chip design to the semiconductor fabrication to the packaging of the final chip into an IC. So the entire industry will be eligible for the incentives under the scheme. It will be a little premature for me to comment on the name of the potential beneficiaries of the program. But given the comprehensive nature of Semicon India program, pretty much everyone in the industry would be eligible to take incentives under the program.
So, Lakshya, just to sort of, this is from my end actually. If I may ask that, so someone like obviously a mobile developer would also benefit from the semiconductor business in India, right? Okay, so I'm just trying to sort of see like which companies and the entire mobile industry is open in that sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. The entire electronics manufacturing industry, from mobile phones to IT hardwares, and most importantly, the automobile industry,
Yes.
who have saw a major setback during the pandemic, would be the beneficiary of the Semicon India program.
Right, and I think now with the renewed sort of force towards electronic vehicles, I think this is a great sort of efficiency building that India is targeting. So we'll take another question that we've gotten. What are the main challenges for India to attract semiconductor production?
So in terms of challenges, a couple of points from my end. First of all, during the conception of the program, which went almost for last year now with the launch of the expression of interest, one of the key challenges has been the need to build an ecosystem for it. The entire ecosystem in terms of specialty gases and chemicals suppliers, raw material suppliers, wafers and substrate suppliers, capital equipment suppliers. So that ecosystem, building that ecosystem is the largest challenge that we aim to address in the Semicon India program. Additionally, all the new facilities and fabs coming into the Semicon India program will require sustained loading offtake that can ensure that the facilities stay operational for a continued duration of time, because any downtime in a semiconductor fab eventually delays their production capacity and the yields in the process. So I would say the sustained offtake and building of a semiconductor ecosystem would be the two key challenges for Semicon India.
Lakshya, just one little question pertaining to one of the slides where you presented the kind of parks that are being developed across parts of India to support this vision. And I see that there is like Gujarat, a lot of the southern states are there. Is there a way that these parks are coming up? Do the states have to be involved, or like how does it work with the development of these parks? What is the core motivation of developing it in these areas? Is there like some efficiency gains that are happening?
Yeah, so since the launch of the scheme, Government of India has been in sustained engagement with the state governments on what could be the potential location for the semiconductor fab complex in India. Based on our analysis, preliminary analysis, and the information received from the state ecosystem, we have a broader understanding on the land available in these states and the availability of power and reliable water supply for the facilities. So based on that, we have built that preliminary analysis. But again, as I said, the final location of the fab would be determined on the business consideration as per industry to industry.
Great, that is brilliant. Thank you so much, Lakshya. We still have questions coming in, but we've already passed our time here, the 1 hour mark. So I think what we'll do is we'll get back to everyone regarding any questions we have on email. I think this was an extremely great session on understanding the transformations that India is seeing in terms of the manufacturing sector, as well as, of course, a very great presentation by Lakshya on the semiconductor industry in India and the scope for investments here. I would encourage everyone to visit the Invest India page and the EMIS page. If I may, actually, I can quickly show you. You can visit our EMIS website and you can see here. Oh, Raja, I'm sorry, are you raising a hand? One second.
No, I was just requesting if you can put your email address in the chat box, and Rohini, will that be visible to all the participants, so that they can get back to Lakshya for any questions, further assistance that they require for their operations in India.
Rohini, you are on mute.
Sorry, there was a technical glitch. I'm afraid. Beg your pardon, everyone. I'm saying we can definitely share Lakshya's email with everyone, and what we can do is we can reach out to all of the people who have registered with us and have attended the webinar, and we can share that with them separately on an email as well. So I think we'll do that. Thank you for that suggestion. I think everyone will stand to benefit from this. But just to quickly show you our EMIS platform, as you can see here, and you can actually find a lot of information on the manufacturing sector, on semiconductors. As you can see here, we have quite an exhaustive list of sectors that we cover under EMIS. And if you see the technology, media, and telecom sector, for example, and we can see the key industry news reports, sort of news and M&A deals. Everything is available in like this one place, and then you can open it directly from here, the top companies which are involved in these sectors. So this is just how the EMIS website looks like. For those who are already using EMIS, obviously know the great benefits that come with it. You can have a dashboard where you can monitor all your you can sort of customize this for monitoring anything that you are working on. Anyway, everything is added here, so anyone who is interested can request to check check the platform, and we'd be happy to sort of extend a trial and whatever, we can work something out with the team here. So with that said, we are coming to a close. We would encourage everyone to have a look at our webinar pages. We also have another brand, CIC, which we spoke about, and as you can see, that specializes in macroeconomic data. So we also cover industry data in our CIC database, and that can be very relevant for anyone who is exploring industry related information. And with that, please do look at our latest webinars. You can access it here. It's on EMIS and CIC both. The link here is CIC data, but you can access it on the EMIS website as well. Thank you, everyone. It was great having you on this webinar, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.